They say every love story begins with magic. Mine did too, or so I believed. I met Ethan on a rainy afternoon at a coffee shop just off Main Street. The kind of place where the smell of roasted beans clung to your clothes and the baristas knew your order by heart. He was standing ahead of me in line, arguing with the cashier about paying for my drink. I didn't even know him, and yet there he was, flashing that crooked smile, insisting it was his pleasure. I should have seen it even then, the way he bulldozed over small boundaries with a charming laugh. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled back, cheeks flushed, heart fluttering like a schoolgirl's. He was everything I'd ever been told to wait for. Attentive, funny, protective in a way that made me feel seen. Ethan asked about my favorite books, remembered my birthday after one casual mention, sent flowers to my office just because. My friends were envious. My family was thrilled. And me? I was already halfway in love. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year later, married. A lifetime of dreams packed neatly into a white dress and a shaky I do. The beginning was a golden haze. He held my hand when I was nervous at my new job. He made a playlist of songs that reminded him of me for our weekend drives. He would text every hour just to say he missed me. Felt intoxicating. Felt like destiny. But even in those early days there were tiny cracks. Moments so brief and so subtle that I brushed them aside, like dust from a windowsill. One night at a friend's birthday party, Ethan grew unusually quiet. When I asked what was wrong, he shrugged it off, but later that night, he whispered into the darkness, "You laughed a little too hard at Mark's jokes, you know?" I laughed it off, kissed his forehead, and promised to be more careful. More careful about what exactly I wasn't sure. But I wanted him to feel secure. That's what love was, right? Compromise. I didn't know it then, but I had just taken the first step into a maze I wouldn't know how to escape. At first, the comments were rare, sly, half-joking. "Who were you texting at lunch? Was it that guy from work? I bet you wish you'd married someone richer, huh?" Said with a smile. Said with a kiss. Said like it was nothing. And I laughed because that's what you do when someone you love says something that stings. You pretend it doesn't. Love covers a multitude of sins. Until it doesn't. Over time, the cracks deepened, spiderwebbing across the shiny surface of our life together. Ethan's questions became more insistent. His need to know where I was, who I was with, what I was wearing, it became less about caring and more about control. Still, I didn't name it. I didn't dare. Instead, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't attentive enough. Maybe I was too friendly. Maybe love, real love, demanded a kind of sacrifice I hadn't yet understood. And so I folded myself smaller day by day, trimming my edges to fit inside the version of me Ethan seemed to need. I stopped going to happy hours after work. I unfollowed old friends from college. I changed my wardrobe to more modest outfits that wouldn't make Ethan worry. Each small surrender felt like a loving choice at the time. I didn't realize I was building my own cage, one compromise at a time. Looking back, it wasn't one moment that broke me. It was 1,000 tiny moments stacked one on top of another, until one day I looked around and realized I didn't recognize my own life anymore. But back then, in those early days, I still believed. I believed love was enough. I believed Ethan loved me. I believed that if I just tried harder, loved better, gave more, the uneasy feeling inside me would go away. I was wrong. And the cost of that belief, the slow, invisible erosion of who I was, would soon become the heaviest price I would ever pay. It started small, like most poisons do. One night, after I'd spent an extra hour at work preparing a presentation, Ethan was waiting for me at home, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Who were you really with?" he asked. No hello. No smile. Just suspicion, thick in the air between us. I laughed, nervous. "I told you we had to finish the quarterly report. I can show you the emails if you want." "Don't lie to me, Claire." The way he said my name like it tasted bitter, froze the words in my throat. I tried to explain. I tried to reason. But reason had no place here. In Ethan's mind, guilt was not proven. It was assumed. That night was the first time he slept on the couch. I cried myself to sleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gone from fairy tale to fracture so quickly. But the next morning Ethan was back. All apologies and sweetness. He cooked breakfast, kissed my forehead, whispered, "I just love you too much, that's all. Love." He wielded that word like a weapon, And I was too blinded to see the wounds. The pattern repeated. An innocent conversation at the grocery store. An accusation. A friendly wave to an old classmate. A cold silence that lasted for days. Each time the recovery was swift and intense. Grand gestures, tearful apologies, promises to work on it. And each time I forgave him a little faster. Because I loved him. Because I thought this was what marriage meant, standing by each other no matter what. It wasn't until much later that I would realize. Marriage isn't supposed to feel like a battlefield where only one person is allowed to win. The walls of my world shrank. I stopped going out without him. I stopped answering calls from my friends. It was just easier than explaining every conversation. Even family gatherings became tense exercises in managing Ethan's moods. He didn't need to raise his hand to hurt me. His words, his doubts, his relentless questioning, they bruised deeper than fists ever could. But still, I told myself it wasn't abuse. Because he didn't hit me. Because he still said he loved me. Because I didn't want to be the kind of woman who failed at her marriage. I wore my denial like armor, even as it rusted and cracked under the weight of the truth. One evening, after a particularly brutal argument, something about a text from my coworker that he claimed was too friendly, Ethan pulled me into his arms and whispered, "I can't live without you, Claire. Don't ever leave me." And for a terrifying moment, I felt both trapped and needed in the same breath. That's how it works. They build you up and tear you down in the same motion, until you don't know which way is up anymore. I wish I could tell you that I saw it clearly then. That I packed my bags, called my brother, ran for the hills. But I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because I was afraid of what life without him would look like. I stayed because somewhere deep inside I still believed I could fix it. Fix him. Spoiler alert. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You can only lose yourself trying. And I was losing myself piece by painful piece. But the worst was yet to come. Because loving Ethan wasn't just a slow death. It was a lesson in how invisible a person could become, even in plain sight. The cracks didn't happen overnight. They formed slowly like tiny fractures beneath polished marble, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. I started noticing the change in myself before I ever dared admit there was a change in Ethan. I laughed less. I answered questions like I was stepping through a minefield. Simple decisions, what to wear, what to say, became agonizing debates in my own mind. Would Ethan think this dress was too tight? Would he accuse me of trying to impress someone else if I wore lipstick? The freedom I used to take for granted was gone, replaced with a constant second-guessing of everything I did. Still, I convinced myself it was normal. Wasn't marriage about compromise? Wasn't love about sacrifice? That's what he told me every time I questioned the growing unease inside me. If you really loved me, you wouldn't mind. He'd say with a wounded look that made me feel like the villain. You know how much I worry. Is it so hard to just be careful? Be careful. Those words became a mantra. Be careful what you say. Be careful how you act. Be careful not to give him a reason to doubt you. But the truth was, Ethan didn't need a reason. He invented them. One afternoon, I found him going through my phone while I was folding laundry. No shame, no apology. Just making sure, he said with a smirk. You're too trusting, Claire. The world's full of people who'd love to take you away from me. He said it like a compliment, like his jealousy was proof of how deeply he loved me. I tried to laugh it off, to smooth over the jagged edge of his words. But something inside me twisted. Something small but important. Trust. It was supposed to be the foundation we built everything on. Instead, it was crumbling beneath my feet. The accusations became more frequent, more absurd. A friendly cashier at the grocery store smiled at me. Clearly, I was leading him on. I stayed late for a team meeting. Obviously, I was sneaking around. Each time I defended myself, patiently at first, then desperately, then numbly. Because no matter how much I explained, how much I swore my innocence, it never mattered. In Ethan's mind, the verdict had already been decided. I was guilty. I would always be guilty. After a while, I stopped fighting. It was easier to apologize for things I hadn't done than to try to convince him otherwise. Apologies became my currency. I paid in tears, in promises, in shrinking bits of myself. The saddest part? It worked. At least for a while. Every apology bought me a few hours of peace. Every surrender delayed the next storm. But peace built on fear is not peace at all. It's just the quiet before the next collapse. My family started noticing the change, though they didn't have the words for it. You seem tired, Claire, my mother said during Sunday brunch. Is everything okay? I smiled too brightly. Just busy. Work's been crazy. The lies rolled off my tongue easier than they should have, because admitting the truth even to myself felt like treason. What would I say anyway? That the man who swore to love and protect me was slowly dismantling me from the inside out? That I was trapped in a life that looked perfect on the outside but felt like a prison inside? No, that wasn't a story people wanted to hear. It wasn't a story I wanted to tell. Instead, I wore my mask, the smiling, dutiful wife, and tried to survive one day at a time. But masks are heavy, and eventually even the best ones start to crack. The night it finally slipped was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Unremarkable. The kind of night you don't expect to remember forever. I was setting the table for dinner, just 2 plates just like always, when Ethan walked in, his face already dark with suspicion. Who called you at lunch? He demanded, tossing his keys onto the counter with a loud clatter. I blinked confused. I think it was Rachel. She was just. Liar. The word sliced the air between us. I opened my mouth to protest, but he was already moving toward me, voice rising, hands clenched at his sides. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see what's going on? Tears pricked my eyes, not from fear, not yet, but from sheer exhaustion. Ethan, please, I whispered. There's nothing going on. You're the only one I love. The only one I've ever loved. He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. And then, in a voice so soft it chilled me, he said, You're lucky I love you enough to forgive you. No one else would. Forgive me. For a crime I hadn't committed. I nodded. I thanked him. And I hated myself a little more. Because deep down in the quietest part of me, the part one was trying so desperately to silence, I knew. This wasn't love. It was ownership. And if I didn't find a way out, someday there would be nothing left of me to save. At some point, the walls stopped feeling like walls. They became the air I breathed, invisible, constant, suffocating. I didn't wake up one morning and realize I was trapped. No. It happened the way shadows stretch slowly across the ground as the sun sinks. Inch by inch, so gently that you don't notice until everything around you is dark. My world grew smaller with every passing day. First it was my friends. Rachel called less often. When she did, I ignored her texts under the excuse of being busy. Busy managing Ethan's moods. Busy avoiding his questions. Busy surviving. She tried, bless her. She left voicemails filled with concern, invitations to lunch, tickets to that art show we used to dream of attending together. Each time, Ethan had a reason why I couldn't go. You know how she flirts with everyone. She's a bad influence. You really think she wants what's best for you? Friends like that only encourage you to forget your responsibilities. Responsibilities. As if loving Ethan was a job, a full-time role that demanded total loyalty and complete isolation. Eventually the calls stopped. Rachel faded into the background of my life like an old photograph, still cherished but unreachable. Then it was my family. Phone calls with my brother Mark became strained. Sunday visits turned into quick check-ins where I plastered on my best smile and dodged questions with rehearsed ease. We're doing great, I'd say, forcing a lightness into my voice that felt foreign. Just busy. You know how it is. They wanted to believe me. I wanted them to believe me, because the alternative, admitting that something was very, very wrong, was too terrifying to face. And so I built my own prison brick by brick with every lie I told, every truth I buried. Ethan didn't need to lock me away. I did it for him. But sometimes the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Little things, the way my heart would race when his car pulled into the driveway, the way my stomach twisted when his name lit up my phone, whispered a truth I wasn't ready to hear. I was afraid of him. Not in the way a woman fears a stranger in a dark alley. No, this fear was quieter, more insidious. It lived in the spaces between his words. It grew in the moments after an argument, when he would slam a door just a little too hard, when his silence would stretch just a little too long. He never hit me. Not once. But sometimes I almost wished he would. Because bruises you can point to. Bruises make it real. Instead, I lived with invisible wounds, the kind that bleed silently, staining everything they touch. There were good days, of course. Moments when Ethan would laugh with me, tease me, pull me close and tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. Those moments were the most dangerous, because they convinced me that maybe, just maybe, it was all in my head. Maybe I really was too sensitive. Maybe I did overreact. Maybe if I just tried harder, loved better, gave more, everything would go back to the way it was. But love shouldn't feel like a battle where you're the only one bleeding. Took me a long time to see that. Longer still to admit it. One night, after another endless argument over nothing, a forgotten text, a misplaced smile, I found myself standing in the bathroom, gripping the sink so hard my knuckles turned white. I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were hollow, her shoulders slumped, her mouth twisted into a tight, permanent line. I barely recognized her. And somewhere deep inside, a voice, small but stubborn, whispered, "This isn't love. This isn't life. This isn't you." I splashed cold water on my face, scrubbed away the evidence of tears, and pasted on a smile before stepping back into the living room where Ethan waited, remote in hand, like nothing had happened. Because in his world nothing had. Only in mine was the damage real. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, I made a silent promise to myself. I would find a way out. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew one thing for certain. If I stayed, there would be nothing left of me to save. And for the first time in a long, long while, that thought scared me more than the idea of being alone. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It wasn't the accusations or the endless battles. It was the silence. The thick, heavy silence that wrapped itself around my life, suffocating me slowly, so subtly that I barely noticed until I couldn't breathe. I had grown used to keeping my head down, to swallowing my words before they ever saw the light. But silence has a way of leaking out. Through tired eyes, forced smiles, and the quiet, trembling way your hands move when you're always waiting for the next explosion. Others saw it, of course. They just didn't know what they were seeing. Or maybe they did. Maybe it was easier not to ask. Mrs. Bennett, our neighbor, had lived next door for nearly 20 years. A widow with kind eyes and a garden full of roses. She always waved when she saw me, always asked about my day, always lingered just a little too long, as if she was waiting for me to say something. But I never did. What could I say? My husband is slowly erasing me. I live in fear of his moods. I don't know who I am anymore. Those aren't the kinds of things you shout over a picket fence. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm fine." Until even I almost believed it. But Mrs. Bennett wasn't stupid. One afternoon, after Ethan stormed out of the house over some invented slight, I found her standing by the mailbox, pretending to sort letters. "Everything okay, dear?" she asked, her voice too casual to be casual. I hesitated. For one heartbeat, I almost told her. I almost spilled everything right there on the cracked sidewalk, the fear, the loneliness, the endless ache of pretending. But then I saw her eyes, wide with concern, yes, but also edged with helplessness. What could she really do? What would she say if I told her my husband, the charming, successful man everyone admired, was slowly crushing the life out of me? Nothing. She would say nothing. Because the truth is, when abuse doesn't leave bruises, people don't want to see it. And so I smiled again, that brittle, exhausted smile, and said, "Just a silly argument. You know how it is." She nodded, but her eyes said she knew exactly how it was. And she said nothing. The weight of her silence pressed down on me harder than Ethan's words ever could. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. Even when I stood in a room full of people, family gatherings, neighborhood parties, work events, I felt like a ghost. Smiling, nodding, laughing on cue. Playing the part so well that sometimes I fooled even myself. But late at night, when the house was dark and Ethan's breathing filled the room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had become this version of myself. The Claire who used to dream big, laugh loudly, love fearlessly. She was a memory now, fading more each day. And Ethan, he didn't even have to lift a finger. All he had to do was plant the seeds of doubt and watch them grow, twisting around my heart until I no longer trusted myself. I stopped making decisions, stopped voicing opinions, stopped wanting anything that might make me visible, because visibility meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was dangerous. It wasn't just about making him angry anymore. It was about surviving the slow erosion of who I was. And the cruelest part? He framed it all as love. I just care about you too much. I just want to protect you. No one will ever love you like I do. Maybe he even believed it. But love built on fear isn't love. It's possession. And I was no longer a wife in Ethan's eyes. I was property. Something to own. Something to control. The realization hit me hardest one rainy evening. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes when Ethan walked in. His face twisted with barely contained fury. "Where were you this afternoon?" he barked. I froze. I told you. I ran to the store. Don't lie to me. The plate slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. For a moment we both stared at it. The broken pieces, the tiny shards scattering underfoot. And something inside me broke too. Not with a scream. Not with a sob. But with a terrible aching silence. I crouched down, picking up the pieces carefully, the ceramic cutting into my skin. Ethan didn't help. He just stood there watching. And Mrs. Bennet? She was outside, pruning her roses, pretending not to hear. Pretending not to see. That's the thing about silence. Protects no one. It only empowers the ones who thrive in the dark. And Ethan, he was thriving. As for me, I was disappearing. But somewhere deep inside, the smallest flicker of who I used to be still burned. A fragile, stubborn ember. And in that moment, crouched on the kitchen floor, bleeding and broken and unseen, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to die in this house. Not like this. One day, somehow, I would find a way to escape. Even if it killed me trying. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you have nothing left to lose. It crept into me slowly after that night on the kitchen floor. A cold, steady clarity that dulled the fear and sharpened my instincts. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply watched. And what I saw once I really looked terrified me more than anything Ethan had ever said. He wasn't just paranoid. He wasn't just controlling. He was preparing for something. I found the first clue one afternoon. A manila folder tucked carelessly into his desk drawer. Inside were copies of my private emails, bank statements, even old photos from years ago. Scribbled notes ran along the margins. Dates, names, wild accusations connecting dots that didn't even exist. It was like peering into the mind of a stranger. A dangerous stranger. If he couldn't control me, he would destroy me. That much was clear. And suddenly, the urgency was deafening. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to get out. But escape wasn't simple. Ethan had control over everything, the accounts, the car, even the passwords to my email and phone. He tracked my every move, monitored every call, every purchase. He hadn't just trapped me emotionally, he had built a cage around my life. I started planning in secret. Hiding cash wherever I could. Inside tampon boxes, inside old coat pockets, behind loose bricks in the fireplace. Memorizing the phone numbers of people I still trusted, Mark, my brother. A local women's shelter. A lawyer. And pretending every single day that everything was fine. Mark caught on. During a strained phone call, I let my voice crack just enough, said a few words too carefully. Later that night, he texted me. "When you're ready, I'll be there." Hope, fragile and terrifying, bloomed quietly in my chest. But hope made me reckless. Ethan sensed it. He became more volatile, more watchful. He started checking the car mileage every time I left the house. Started questioning every single detail of my day, looking for cracks. I had to move faster. Then came the final warning. Ethan announced a romantic weekend getaway. He booked a hotel in the middle of nowhere. No towns, no neighbors, no witnesses. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't a vacation. It was a trap. That night, I lay awake while Ethan snored beside me, my mind racing. I couldn't go. If I went, I wouldn't come back. Tomorrow had to be the day. I reviewed the plan over and over until I could see it even when I closed my eyes. At dawn, while Ethan went for his usual Saturday jog, I would leave. No hesitation. No second chances. Mark would be waiting 3 blocks away with his old truck engine running. All I had to do was get there. Morning came heavy and slow. Ethan laced up his shoes, kissed my forehead, smiled like nothing was wrong. "Have a good run," I whispered, heart pounding against my ribs. He didn't suspect a thing. The second the door shut, I moved. Grabbed the cash, the burner phone, a small bag I had hidden under the laundry basket. I slipped out the back door, the cool morning air hitting my face like a slap. And I ran. Mark was there just like he promised. I barely had time to pull the door shut before he hit the gas, taking us away from the only life I had known for years. The house, the cage, grew smaller in the rearview mirror. And with it, the version of me who believed I deserved to be trapped. I didn't know what the future would look like. But for the first time in forever, I was free. And freedom, even in its most terrifying form, was worth everything I had lost. Freedom didn't come with fanfare. There were no fireworks. No grand moments of triumph. Just quiet. Heavy, unfamiliar quiet. And fear. The first few days, I barely moved from the bed in the cheap motel room Mark found for me. The walls were thin, the sheets scratchy, the air stale. But I was safe. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without permission. Sleep came in fits and starts. I kept the lights on. I slept fully clothed, shoes by the door, a bag packed at the foot of the bed. Some habits don't die easily, especially the ones you built to survive. Mark checked in on me daily. He never pushed, never asked for details. He just brought coffee, groceries, soft words that didn't demand answers. It was enough. More than enough. Still, fear clung to me like a second skin. Every knock at the door made my heart race. Every unknown number on my phone made my stomach flip. I lived on edge even though the war was supposedly over. Healing wasn't beautiful. It was ugly, slow, and often felt more painful than the life I'd escaped. There were nights I woke up sobbing into my pillow, haunted by memories I couldn't silence. There were mornings I questioned if I had made a mistake. But deep down beneath the fear, something else had taken root. A stubborn, pulsing thing. Hope. Small at first. Fragile. But real. I found a small apartment 2 towns over. It wasn't much. Peeling paint, a leaky faucet, a view of the parking lot. But it was mine. Every square foot of it belonged to me and no one else. I got a job at a bookstore. Filing dusty shelves, making minimum wage. Breathing in the scent of old paper and fresh beginnings. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself Ethan had buried. I started therapy too. The first session I sat in silence. Ashamed. Exhausted. When the words finally came, they came out broken and raw. I don't know who I am anymore. The therapist smiled kindly and said, "That's okay. We'll find her together." Bit by bit, I started piecing myself back together. A new bank account. A cheap car. A cat named Juniper who loved me without condition or question. Tiny victories. But victories nonetheless. Ethan tried to find me. Of course he did. Emails. Voicemails. Even letters hand-delivered to my old workplace. But I was done listening. Done giving him space inside my head. The legal process was brutal. Filing restraining orders. Hiring a lawyer. Dragging every dark, ugly truth into the light. There were days I wanted to give up. Days I thought about disappearing altogether. But then I remembered. I had already survived the hardest part. One evening, sitting on my tiny balcony, a cup of cheap coffee in hand, I watched the sun sink below the horizon. The sky bled pink and gold, soft and forgiving. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Ethan took a lot from me. My confidence. My trust. Years of my life. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take my soul. I'm still healing. Still learning to trust my own voice again. Some days are harder than others. But every day I wake up in my own bed, in my own home, with no one questioning where I've been or what I'm thinking. That's a kind of victory too. This isn't the life I once dreamed of. It's something better. Something real. It's mine. And after everything, that is enough.